I think, in the end, it's been a really good week. Our typical kind of work week. I think it was beneficial that what we did last week, and doing that whole mock game, in preparation for the mock game, and then recreating it this week so that the guys could have a real sense of the practice format, the meeting schedule, just how we go about our business from day to day. I think was helpful. I think the guys were really comfortable with what we were doing. I think it was a good work week as far as physicality, the speed in which we operated in. I think we recognize this is going to be a physical football game against a good team, and our execution is going to be critical in all three phases.
Thank you, Coach. Brian, why don't you start us off?
Steve, one game does not make or break anything in terms of the season, but how much do you talk to the guys about just thinking about, like, hey, get off to a good start, let's get a clean break out of the gate?
In reference to the game or to the season?
The game, just Saturday, wanting to get off on a good start.
That's ideal. I don't think I'd be any different than any other head coach, start fast, finish strong, right? I mean, that's pretty common nomenclature for coaches, but the reality of it is every game takes on a personality and a life of its own. And, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that our guys are put in good position to perform to the best of their ability early on in the ball game. That doesn't mean that we won't be aggressive and attacking by nature, but hopefully that we're doing things that they've shown to do really well over time. But again, that may mean we get the lead. That may mean we fall behind. That may mean the game is tied early on. I don't know. Every game takes on a life of its own. And then ultimately, then you start having to make the necessary adjustments, whether it's, personnel driven, scheme driven. And then, come the fourth quarter, do you have that ability to finish and make those plays at the critical moments, to have the mental and physical toughness to do that in what's going to be a really trying atmosphere, I think, for both teams, given the weather and the kickoff time.
Dennis, go ahead.
Coach, Hudson's been pretty open about wanting to improve as a vocal leader. What have you seen in the past, whether it was camp and even more particularly this week of game week? Have you seen him maybe improve in that respect? Because it seems like it would be more natural now that he's the starter.
Well, I think it's, a lot of the vocal stuff may come on the sidelines, especially in the mock game when you're having to make those adjustments, or you're pumping a guy up, or you're letting a guy know, hey, that was a nice catch or good adjustment. Those are the things I think that jump out to me naturally. I don't know that, I don't know that you're just going to see him breaking down the huddle, like on the sidelines with the entire team around him. And I think that type of respect over time will come naturally and is a little bit more organic. But I do think there's that natural leadership that comes to play, especially from an offensive perspective, about the guys that are out there with you. And, clearly he's got to drive the car on the field and get people aligned and the cadence and all those kinds of things, and make the necessary protection adjustments and those types of things. So you have to be vocal to do that. But I think him being vocal comes at the most part really between series and maybe, right at the start of a series. So I think it's a natural progression. I think it's relatively organic.
Chuck, go ahead.
Steve, as much as you're focused on the game and your guys right now, does this at all feel a little different than maybe your other two head coaching debuts, just because of the journey you've been on the last 6 years and everything that's kind of led to this moment for you? And could you reflect on that just a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think every stop's been a little bit different, right? My first game ever as a head coach at Washington was exactly that. And I'm sure I remember there was a lot of, anxiousness, excitement, but because of the unknowns, you'd never been put in so many different scenarios, and you're just trying to, play the tape forward and figure out what you're going to do. The second time through, I really felt like it was about, like, okay, this is where I was supposed to be. And that was kind of how it went there at SC. And this one, I think there's a level of, appreciation for the opportunity. I think I definitely have a level of humility because when nobody likes getting fired. I've talked about this before. I mean, I don't care if you get a big paycheck or not. That's not fun for you. That's not fun for your family. That's not fun for your coaching staff and their families. A lot of people get affected by that. So now to be back in the seat, I think I've got a great deal of appreciation for the opportunity. But I think through a lot of the work that I've done individually, I'm in a pretty good place, just understanding that, my demeanor, how I feel, I think is going to be a great indicator of how our team's going to feel. And I didn't recognize that as much early on in my career, that most teams really take on the personality of the head coach. And I think when you're level-headed, when you're focused, when you're highly competitive and driven, when you have a chip on your shoulder, maybe with something to prove, that your team kind of takes on that persona too. And so I feel like that's probably a little bit of the shift in the psyche for me that has occurred over time. But for me, I feel like this is right where I'm supposed to be at this time of my life, and it feels great being here. Looking forward to the opportunity, and just want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power, as I said, to put our players in the best position to be successful one play at a time.
Chip, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, wondering if you could give us any injury update for the week. And also, what did you see from Luke Brockermeyer that, moved him up into the starting role at middle?
Yeah, no, the injury stuff is still status quo from where we were. Luke, I was talking about this last night. The whole linebacking core, when we went into spring ball, we didn't have DeMarvion. He was coming off of the shoulder surgery. We really didn't know. I didn't know much about Luke Brockermeyer, and Ovi wasn't even on campus. He was still in South Bend, Indiana. And so now to get to this point with those three guys as our starters, when we're in base defense, I think just speaks volumes to our staff's ability to really evaluate and not judge a book by its cover, to give everybody a clean slate and a fair opportunity. And what Luke did was just play really sound, good football. I think he learned our scheme really well. I think he's got a very high football IQ. He's a savvy player. He's a tremendous leader on defense as far as being a Mike linebacker and making the calls and getting people lined up and making the checks. And I think that's where his football IQ comes into play, but also his confidence comes into play, because, you got to be vocal in that spot to make those things happen. And I think that's a credit to him. I think there's something to be said about a guy who, I hate saying a guy's an overachiever, because we achieve what we're capable of. But if you want to label him an overachiever, I think that there's something to be said about that kind of personality in the middle of your defense, and that it starts to permeate to the rest of those guys on defense, that playing smart, playing fast, playing physical, and putting yourself in the best position to be successful. And that's what Luke does.
Ed, you're up.
Coach, you talked about this earlier about the heat. I know you've coached in hot places in Arizona and in Alabama, but are you taking extra precaution this weekend because it's going to be really, really hot? And also, do you think the networks will ever get the message that it's pretty stupid to have kickoffs at 3:30 in the middle of summertime in Texas?
You'll say that a lot better than I would ever say it. So, hey, they tell us when to kick the ball off, and we'll be there and we'll go play. But, I do, I have, my concern for the safety of our players, for Louisiana's players, and for all the people that attend the game. I think that it's really important that everybody hydrates, everybody takes care of themselves, that, it's one thing to go out in 100-degree weather, for 30 minutes and jump in the pool. We're going to be out there for 4+ hours in pads and in a game and those types of things. So yes, we are taking the necessary precautions to make sure that our guys are in the best position, for their own health and their own safety. So whether that's hydration, whether that's, potential IVs, whether that's, cooling benches, we're trying to take in all things into account to make sure that, our players are healthy and safe and have an opportunity to do what they love to do, which is play football.
Kirk, go ahead.
Yes, Steve, I was curious, the number of plays that you script to start the game. And also you're known as kind of the best play caller in college football. So is there a tendency to want to show off a little bit, or you hold a lot more back?
I don't ever lose sight of the goals to win the game. At the end of the day, when we walk back up that tunnel, I want to have one more point than our opponent. And whatever we need to do to try to make that happen, that's what I try to do as a play caller. I don't get stubborn, or at least I try not to get stubborn. Hey, this is what we said we were going to call in this situation. Sometimes there's a better call based on the flow of the game. And, that has been something that I really try to pride myself on through this process of being a play caller is, yes, we work really hard throughout the week and we try to put together a really good game plan. And we try to gather information in our opening calls of the game to figure some things out. But in the end, you got to make the best call available at that time that your players can execute at a high level, regardless if that's what we said on Wednesday night that we were going to run. Because Wednesday night, we thought they were going to play one thing. Saturday at 4:48, they're playing something different. And so we got to be able to make those adjustments. And so I've tried to pride myself on that. And in the end, if it appears that I'm showing off, well, that's great. I mean, that's what you guys write for. But the reality of it is we're just trying to win the game. I'll be quite frank. We're really just trying to win the game.
Roger, go ahead.
Coach, you talked about the heat. Is that also a situation where you're going to have to roll more guys in and depth becomes an issue, and you're going to have to trust guys to let the staff know when they need a break?
Well, yeah, without question. I think, we were very diligent on that as a staff. And we really go over it one last time Saturday morning in our staff meeting to make sure that we understand how we're going to play the players. And we go through every position. If player X, needs to take a break or gets injured, this is the next player that's going to go in. And if something happens to him, here's the next player that's going to go in. And sometimes there's two moves in place. If one guy goes out, maybe the guy that's moving to the next spot is a starter in another position. We'll move him over to put that next guy up at the third spot. So we just try to, like I said, we try to give the players that give us the best chance to have success, the opportunity to play. And we are aware of the conditions, what we'll be playing in. And I think we've got a good plan. But again, the best plans always have the ability to be adjusted on the fly, and because things happen. And if we don't recognize that, then we'll make moves Saturday that aren't in the best interest of our team in winning the game. So we got to be really aware. We got to be very cognizant of it's a 4-quarter game, and not wear anybody out, in the first 30 minutes to make sure that they're there for us in those critical moments in the fourth quarter.
Got time for a few last ones. Onward, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, on Monday, you said Casey would play in the game on Saturday. Assuming it's not in mop-up duty, if Casey comes in and gets hot, do you stay with the hot hand, or do you go back with Hudson in a scenario like that?
It'll just be a gut feeling, flow of the game. I hate to say yes and or no to that answer, because like I said, every game takes on a life of its own. There's a flow and a rhythm to the game and what's happening in game and what's the score and how we're playing on defense, how we're playing on offense. Are we running the ball? There's a lot of factors that go into it. Is that a possible scenario? Yes. They're all possible at this point.
Cedric, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, we know that coaching is a lot about observation. From your eyes and your staff, did you see enough in the leadership category this summer, especially knowing that you got some inexperience at what we both agree is the most important position in all of sports?
Well, I think the good thing is, that guy, for the most part, is surrounded by a pretty veteran team. And we've got a relatively, pretty veteran offensive line. We've got a veteran, at the tight end spot where we've got a veteran running back position. Maybe not quite as experienced at wide receiver, but we're a very veteran defense. And when you look at our defensive front, our secondary, there's a lot of juniors and seniors that we're talking about that are starting for us in this game. And so, yes, I do think we've got a great deal of leadership on our team that is there for one another. And the quarterback would be no different. I think these guys are in full support of Hudson, and we'll be there for him. And then when Casey gets in there, I think they'll be in full support of him. But I think that's where our team first mentality has really come in, that we focus on us and one another and not so much the opponent. And by doing so, we're able to be there for one another.
Two last ones. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, a few days ago, you mentioned that, Joshua Moore is a guy that y'all really want to lean on in the receiver room, as a leader. He's a guy that's obviously been through a lot in terms of injuries, suspension, working his way back. Just curious, what he's done in the time that since you've gotten here to sort of impress you and to give you that faith in him.
Yeah, like all of us on here, when we went to college, I think we've all had our own journey, right? That next phase of our life, we all had our own journey and how it looked. And I think Josh's journey's been his journey. It's been unique to him. And the thing that has been exciting for me in dealing with Josh, I think, in spring ball, it was a little up and down. And, I could see it in him, and I might have gotten a little frustrated with him because I could see it in him, and that just wasn't the level of consistency that I was looking for. And there was a point in summer where our strength staff had mentioned that he was really doing well. And I had lunch with him, and he mentioned some things to me that were very mature with real leadership qualities about him that were different than the guy I had talked to 4 months earlier. And at that point, it really felt like the kind of light had turned on, like it clicked on for him. And I just kept trying to push him for more. And I think that he's accepted it. And that's one of the cool things with coaching. It's right. We're here as leaders of men and to motivate these young men to be great people, great players, go on in life to be a really good husband, father, teammate, whatever they end up being. And their journey, and Josh's journey in particular, is one that, because they're acting in one way doesn't mean that they can't change and evolve into something much more, much beyond of the current space they're in. And he's done that, and he's earned our trust, and we have a great deal of belief in him. And I think in turn, because of that, he's got a lot of belief in himself.
Last one, Chuck, go.
A little bit of a out of the box question here, Steve. So excuse me, but do you have any pregame rituals as a coach or anything that you do before a game?
Not too much. No, I mean, I guess I walk the field when I get to the stadium. Half the time I started doing that as an assistant coach because the locker rooms were too crowded, especially on the road. So I didn't like being stuck in these little dingy locker rooms. But, outside of that, I just try to find a calm place and focus place where I can think very clearly and do my job to the best of my ability.